Look at this. The NAFO dog. That's so funny that they did that. I see you've set aside this special time to humiliate yourself in public. This is an article, people. The fear of anybody having an opinion opposite of what they're being told by NATO, the State Department. This is just so, it's so striking. It's so, this is eye-opening to me. I didn't realize it was at this level. I did not. That's nice, dear. Now go fuck off. Another NAFO. So this is the NAFO farm. And then they're showing this here. And that. And then I gave them that also. Give that man 2 medals, and it's Vladimir Putin. One for being that stupid, and the other in the case he loses the first. Oh man, this is so hilarious to me. So evidently this is only hilarious to myself. So I guess I can move on. Let me see what everybody else is saying, because this is just crazy to me. Wow. So let's throw this one up. NAFO people don't have the mental capacity to read anything in length or consume things longer than 15 minutes. Because like I said, there's no way they read this article. There's no way they opened the article and read the article. That's just that didn't happen. So I'm going to come back to this part. Let me drop this line in. A new headset. My ear canals are different, so one itches. So I have to adjust it later. Anyway, that's a little too much information. Let's get here. U.S. and NATO send tanks to fight Russia. Now let's see what they could be reacting to, though, if they did read the article or part of it. This is Andre Damon, and I've read articles from him before. This week, the United Kingdom and Poland announced that they intend to send main battle tanks to fight Russia in Ukraine, opening the way for Germany and the United States to make similar announcements. For the first time since Operation Barbarossa 80 years ago, and I read, this is the quote, German-made tanks will cross the Polish border to take part in a shooting war against Russia. This is, without a doubt, the most reckless and escalatory measure taken by the U.S. and NATO to date. And that was a quote. Let me put this up here. NAFO farm attacks RBN. I think that's a better title, Aaron. NAFO farm attacks RBN. So let's continue to read. And these are the tanks they're showing. The people that are in freezing in the UK. This is where all their money, this is the reason why they're freezing. And let's continue. Let me read the small caption here. Abrams battle tanks stand on rail cars in Lithuania near the Russian border. Oh, this is old Russian tanks. But still, this came from the people of UK, but not from this year. Tanks are offensive, not defensive weapons. Let me say that again. Tanks are offensive, not defensive weapons. They are used to break through enemy entrenchments with the aim of capturing territory. Ukrainian officials have made clear that Western tanks are key to the achievement of their goal in the war, including the reconquest of the Crimea Peninsula held by Russia since 2014. The United States is training hundreds of Ukrainian forces in armored warfare at its base in Bavaria, Germany, carrying out exercises with NATO armored vehicles. The tanks and their crews will leave Germany and enter Ukraine through Poland, where they will be thrown against the Russian front. Modern tanks need vast logistic networks to arm and support them. A single M1 Abrams tank consumes 60 gallons of fuel per hour when deployed. 60 gallons of fuel per hour when deployed. Now, do you see how the United States military military is the biggest polluter? Bigger than over 100 countries combined. I think it's like 130 countries combined. But don't quote me on that because I'm trying to go off memory and I could be wrong a little bit. So let's continue. But 60 gallons of fuel per hour still, that is a staggering amount. A staggering amount. I will never recycle with a war machine ragging about the world. They are killing the planet. Do those German tanks come with square mustaches? Comedians. Interesting. There is some people here, government people here. NATO is using this as an excuse to clear out old stock, start buying shiny new weapons. So sending them into a battle zone is an act of war by definition. What are the tanks going to be used for? So let's continue. These tanks will require a massive train of logistic personnel. And you saw the train in that picture from 2019. Many of them likely to come from the armed forces of NATO countries. Not only the tanks, but their logistics and supply trains will become targets. Each Leopard 2 tank costs approximately $15 million. That is astounding. That is astounding. Oh, let's read Frank's super chat. Read. Nah, reading and knowing history is not the American way. MLK was hit with the bots when he began to attack capitalism and their war in Vietnam. Thank you so much for the comment and the super chat, Frank. And I'm trying to keep my eye on the chat to make sure I don't miss anything here. But let's continue the article. Then I'm going to come back to some of these this NAFO farm that just went completely ballistic, but $15 million. Each Leopard 2 tank costs approximately 15 for those listening, million dollars. What could that be used for? So one tank could do what? One tank could feed how many people? One tank could build how many homes? One tank. This This is Compton Goom My Eyes. You don't want to miss me. I see you in the chat all the time. I figure you're the fun person. You're giving the chat laughter. So I do see. So let's continue. The protection of these weapon systems, not to mention the troops that will serve and supply them, will become a vital military necessity for NATO. And you have to keep this going. You have to create this infrastructure to support the tanks. More money. Cha-ching. The US and NATO have stacked their credibility on the outcome of the war, which is ever more explicitly defined as the military defeat and dismemberment of Russia. The logic of the conflict requires, therefore, an even greater escalation. With its armored columns and supply lines threatened by Russian weapons and air power, either inside Ukraine or over the Polish border, the creation of a no-fly zone will again be mooted in the American press as a vital necessity to protect the commitment that has already been made. This would mean that in the name of defending its military assets, US and NATO pilots and SAM operators would be engaged in shooting down Russian warplanes. Understand, the fly zone would be to protect the tanks because they would become targets. Just the transportation of the tanks into wherever their destination become targets. So then a no-fly zone, this would mean in the name of defending its military asset, the tanks, US and NATO pilots and SAM operators would be engaged in shooting down Russian warplanes, kicking off a direct shooting war between the US and NATO and Russia. This is the prospect for which the American and European populations is being signed up for without their knowledge by governments that promise to avoid World War III and nuclear Armageddon. Do we see what's happening here? Our government is just marching us down the road, marching towards WW 1, 2, 3. Check the spelling for me. All right, let's continue. In an expression of reckless and provocative character of the NATO's action, the New York Times wrote, quote, over the last few weeks, one barrier after another has fallen, end quote, as, quote again, the United States and its allies take on more risk to defend Ukraine. In a lead editorial advocating sending main battle tanks to Ukraine, The Economist wrote, quote, another worry is that if Russia is pushed too far or too fast, its president, Vladimir Putin, could escalate it and, in the worst case, even trigger a nuclear war. These are not baseline fear or baseless fears. We're being marched to nuclear Armageddon. As people are going homeless, as prices are permanent. They call it inflation, but these prices will never go down. That's the thing about it never goes back down. So, but anyway, prices of food, eggs, milk, basic things, hard to find. But we can supply $15 million tanks. One tank could feed how many people? One tank. can build how many homes? $15 million for one tank. The Economist argues for sending tanks despite the danger. And here's a quote. If Mr. Putin concludes that his nuclear threats won him this victory, it would set a terrible precedent. Let me say that again. This is their quote. If Mr. Putin concludes that his nuclear threats won him this victory, it would be a terrible precedent. So we're advocating in The Economist for nuclear Armageddon. They're saying, this sounds just like a bully. If you take Putin's threat of he's going to use nuclear arms and you back down and let him win this war, that set a terrible precedent. Peace sets a terrible precedent. It adds, quote, yielding to Mr. Putin's nuclear threat today sets up more perilous, that word, standoffs tomorrow. These fools got the audacity. Okay, so the imperialist war planners assume that they can intensify their engagement in the war without a Russian response. But if Washington isn't afraid of the consequences of nuclear war, why do its war planners seem to believe the Kremlin will be? In fact, the Economist argument applies with greater force to the Russian side than to the NATO side, because it is the Kremlin and not Washington or Berlin that is confronted with the prospect of regime change. If the Economist editorial board were on the Russian side, what would it be saying? Quote, I guess this is a fictitious quote. If NATO concludes that military escalation won it a victory, it would set a terrible precedent. He's basically, the article is flipping the same quote. If NATO concludes the military escalation that they're doing won them a victory against Putin, doesn't it set a terrible precedent? Why wouldn't they just continue moving forward? And here, after all, yielding to NATO's escalation today sets up more perilous standoffs tomorrow. This, in other words, is an argument for Russia to respond to NATO's escalation by launching an attack on NATO or a nuclear attack on Ukrainian forces. The more the US and NATO escalate, the less reason for Russia to avoid escalating. I'm going to stop there with the article and get back. This is crazy, everybody. This is insane. And so now let me alter what I said earlier. That NAFO farm knew exactly what was in this article, why they went after me. So let's go back to that. Oop. I don't think I had to. This one. Not that one. So I think I have found it here. Okay, here we go. I think I just have to hit the back button here to go back to the tweet. Or go back to Twitter, I should say. I forget what the tweet, or we were looking at this. Now let me readjust what I said earlier. The NAFO farm, which is likely supported by the US government, saw this article, and they probably monitor the World Socialist website. So they knew about this article. So they knew when this article is posted on Twitter, I would bet that anyone who posted that article got a similar response. Maybe not the same amount, but got the similar response because they know what's in this article. They know what this article is exposing here. That the UK and the United States will follow along with Germany. Sending tanks is an escalation because it requires a no-fly zone and it requires NATO forces, US and NATO forces, to shoot down, and SAM operators to shoot down any sort of attack from Russia. How is this supposed to end? So, like I said, this was likely a direct assault. I mean, not likely. You can see it. This NATO troll farm that went after me.